welcome to the English Department Career Day. This is a collaboration between the Career Center and the English Department. My name is Jeff Brown, and I'm a faculty member in the English Department here at SJU. Throughout the day, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give you all insight into different career paths, industries, and to get advice on how to enter and thrive in these fields. These sessions, like I said a moment ago, will be recorded. Our guest today is Katherine Grygo. Welcome, Katherine. Katherine Grygo is a 2016 graduate from SJU with a Bachelor in Arts in English Language and Literature who works for ARC XP at the Washington Post as a senior product manager. Katherine's worked at ARC XP at the Washington Post for over 2 years, and prior to this, worked at Navy Federal Credit Union for 3 years with roles as a product owner, a lead product owner, and a digital experience product analyst. While at SJU, Katherine was active in Alpha Sigma Nu, Sigma Tau Delta, and Campus Ministry. She was also a staff writer for The Hawk and a web content editor and blogger for SJU Blogs. I'm delighted to welcome Katherine Grygo back to Hawk Hill. Hi, Katherine. I just want to let you know I have a list of questions that I'm going to be asking you. And after this, we're going to open it for a Q&A with our listeners. And so just to everybody else who's listening along, once the Q&A opens, you can feel free to either raise your digital hand and share your voice and or video feed, or type questions into the chat. And I'll try to do my best to moderate from both directions. So let's get started. Today, we're going to begin with a series of career-focused questions. And so, Katherine, we're just going to start with boilerplate stuff. Could you describe your current role, the core responsibilities, and what a typical day or week looks like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, thank you all for having me. So before I get into kind of my core responsibilities and what a typical week/day looks like for me, I want to give a little background on what a product manager is, since it's actually a relatively new title that's become popular in the last 15 to 20 years. So product managers lead a cross-functional product development team that's comprised of software engineers, user experience designers, and analysts. And within the team, they identify and articulate new features that will fulfill users' needs and contributes to the company's larger business objectives, and then rallies the team to turn that idea/vision into a reality. So what exactly does that mean? So let's take a product like TikTok. So since I think most of us might be familiar with it. So for example, like TikTok has a feature that lets you share a video with a friend via text. Now, I don't work at TikTok, as mentioned, and I'm not privy to their inner workings, but that feature might have been identified by a product manager who would then work alongside UX designers and software engineers to implement it. So I'm a senior product manager at ARC XP, which is a software company that's owned by the Washington Post. And we provide media organizations and enterprise companies with a suite of software products and tools that enables them to create, manage, and deliver digital experiences. And I specifically oversee ARC's website builder tool. So like most jobs, I think every day and week for me looks a little bit different, but I spend a majority of my day and weeks talking to people who use my tool to hear their feedback and pain points, talking with the amazing designers and engineers I work with to provide feedback and direction on the items that they're working on to ensure that it meets the scope and the requirements. I have meetings with our sales and marketing and training teams to tell them about the new features that we're going to release and providing them with talking points on how to sell them or how to market them or how to train our users on how to use them. I write strategy documents and how-to guides, and I do competitive research to see what other companies in this space are doing. So I think at its core, it's a lot of talking, listening, writing, and researching.
That's terrific. That sounds like a really dynamic and also very intense set of responsibilities coordinating among all those different groups of people. And so I'm wondering, how did you decide to pursue this career?
Yeah, so my journey into product management was a surprise even to myself. When I was working at Navy Federal Credit Union, there became an opportunity available to be a product owner. And I was originally hired to work in their marketing and content strategy department. And so when that kind of job became available, I raised my hand and I said, oh, I'd like to try this out. Why not give it a try? And so kind of from there, I got launched into this opportunity to work on their website redesign, where I found I had this real love for listening to users, hearing their feedbacks, and then working with working collaboratively with people across different functions to implement these innovative technology solutions to help solve some of the problems that were in the financial technology space.
It's terrific. You said that your pathway there sort of surprised you. I'm wondering what has surprised you about the job itself?
Yeah,
Any
so
unexpected things come up along the way?
yeah, so I would definitely say it's the amount of writing I do and the different types of writing that I do. And and how important it is to be able to effectively communicate with two different groups of people. So like in any given day, I'm spending a lot of my time writing. It might be writing a product strategy document that'll be read by executives at my company about new features I'd like my team to build that are, contributing to our overall company goals. It might be something for sales and marketing about messaging for a new feature that we're getting ready to launch, or release notes telling people how to use said feature. Feature requirements docs that are consumed by the software engineers and UX designers I work with. And so for each one of these documents, there's kind of a different type of writing style slash approach that I need to consider for who my reader is. So for something like a sales card for marketing and sales, I can use more descriptive or marketing language. But for something that's for the engineers and designers I work with, I need to be more technical in my approach and in the details that I give.
That's terrific. I am 100% sure we're going to come back to the importance of writing later on in this conversation. But for now, actually, I want to kind of like rewind a little bit. You told us how you got from Navy Federal Credit Union into ArcXP, but let's go back even further. And I would love to hear about how you got your first internship or job, whether that was right after your career at SJU or during, or how you kind of made that transition into this space to begin with.
Yeah. So during the second semester of my junior year, as I was beginning to think about what classes I was going to take, I think it really hit me that my time at SJU, I was closer to the end of my time at St. Joe's than I was to the beginning of my time. And that, like, I'm sure as many of you have experienced, like, that's kind of a really scary thought to have. So I really dug into this idea of like, what would life look like post Hawk Hill, and became pretty dogged about trying to find an internship. So I knew that I wanted to do something at a nonprofit that focused on research and public policy. So this was before like LinkedIn was as incredible as it is today. So I basically Googled nonprofits that are based in Washington, D.C., because I'm from Washington, D.C. And I read a little bit about each one to see what its mission was and if they sounded interesting to me. I then went on their website and looked to see if they had any internship postings. And then if they did, I applied for it and submitted my resume and the ever so fun to write cover letter. And I think I applied to over like 13 places and heard back from a total of one, which was the Aspen Institute, a global nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., and I interviewed for it. And luckily, I got that internship and had the opportunity to work in their communications and public affairs team. And then I kind of did that kind of similar approach for finding my first job out of college too, was going and looking at postings and doing kind of that bulk applying and that bulk interviewing until I landed into my first gig.
Okay, all right. Shifting kind of focus, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is about how your organization and your industry in general demonstrates a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to what degree that informs the way that you kind of do your job.
Yeah, so I think this is a really tough question, and especially within where I work in a larger company, I'm not really sure I can speak to it necessarily with as much detail as somebody who maybe works in human resources or on company culture and DEI initiatives as a whole. I think the tech industry in general has realized how important it is to ensure that the people who work in tech come from diverse backgrounds so that the software they're building and delivering meets the needs of anyone and everyone who's using it. There's been progress made across the industry on ensuring that there's outreach to those who have typically had difficulty entering the field, and collaborations with nonprofits like Girls Who Code that are focused on helping tech become more inclusive. So there's been a lot of progress over the past 10 years. And as someone who works in tech who comes from a non-traditional educational background with a degree in English, I'm really looking forward to seeing what's to come.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. That I guess, I'm really interested in hearing you kind of historicize like the past 10 years, like really in how both you and your industry and the kind of culture has changed. And so even with that in mind, I'm wondering, what is something that you kind of wish somebody had told you back when you were in school, that could have maybe prepared you, or that you now have kind of like 2020 hindsight about?
Yeah, I feel like I could probably like give a TED talk about like the advice that I would give my younger self, especially my younger undergraduate self. And I think the first thing that I would say is one, like enjoy your time on Hawk Hill while you can. Like you are in this very interesting space where you get to be around people with who think differently from you, where there are so many different opportunities and clubs and things like that. So really take advantage of that, like of those opportunities. If there's a club that like interests you, go to the one meeting, because you might find out that like it's something that wasn't even on your radar that could be a passion that you like later develop. And the other thing that I would say too is just like uh aside from enjoying your time, it's to like be present and to live in the moment, which I know is really hard to say when you're thinking about the job market or you're thinking about your summer plans. But as somebody who regularly had an existential crisis about what her future would look like, upon walking across the stage at graduation, uh like it will be okay, and you will find like you are going to like find, you will eventually find something. So be present and enjoy what you like, your time at Hawk Hill while you can.
I think that's really helpful advice. And again, something that has come up earlier in our conversation, is just how difficult it is to anticipate exactly what your career path is going to be, and therefore pinpoint precisely what kinds of things made you so well equipped, to kind of weather the changes and to embrace those opportunities that you've described. But if there were like two or three specific things or experiences that you think that students should engage with while in college to help them prepare for a career, or specifically for a career in the sort of the fields that you're thinking about, tech broadly maybe, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So I think, like I had mentioned before, like product management is a field that's still really new in the tech space.
Mhm.
And I'm going to be honest and say that it's a challenging field to enter after graduation for a liberal arts manager. I have a master's degree, and also I do have some coding experience as well. But I definitely think there are things that that folks can do to prepare to enter, the job market or any field within graduation, after graduation. So I think the first thing is like consider, for like when considering to enter any field, is looking for those leadership opportunities. Like these companies are looking for people who are leaders. So within your club, like, or even within like your major, find those opportunities to maybe like take on a leadership position. When I what like for Alpha Sigma Nu, I think I worked on like, I think my title was something along like director of external communications. That is a very vague college extracurricular title. But what I did was that I wrote emails and I sent emails to like our members, and that's something that you can include on your resume. When I was doing Sigma Tau Delta, I helped like with organizing the like sending some folks to Sigma Tau Delta's convention. So I was able to like put together like some event programming and things like that. So even within those tangible, like within those leadership roles, you have tangible, awesome experience that can help, that you can leverage and put on your resume. And then I think the other thing too is within your courses as an English major, there's a lot of writing opportunities there, whether you're in a public relations course, whether you're writing research papers or things like that. So you can, I think within an English major, like you have a really unique opportunity to be putting together a writing portfolio too. So I would say don't just approach your assignments as a grade, but how could you use this as a portfolio that can help you get a job later down the road?
That's really interesting advice, and it actually plays into explicitly what I was going to ask next, which has to do with the relevance of the English major and the courses that you took to your personal development and also your career developments. And so, what English courses did you take that helped you prepare for the job market in general, or for this line of work, either directly or, as importantly, perhaps given the flexibility, more importantly, indirectly?
Yeah, so it has been a little while since I have thought about my English course load. And I actually looked at my transcript earlier today to help jog my memory of this. But I think two courses that like helped me indirectly prepare for my role was my sophomore seminar and my early American literature course. And you might be thinking to yourself, you work in tech. How do these two courses where you read books and write papers help with that? Um, but as an English major, like when we write papers and we develop a thesis, we always have to consider our opposition's like view to the point that we're arguing so that we can make sure that it's a really sound argument and really prove our point. And I think with that, that's helped me, especially as I'm writing strategy documents or as I'm presenting ideas to, different executives and everything like that, to say that I've thought about this other point of view, and this is why my idea I think is a little bit better than this other idea. So it really does help you with like thinking strategically and to be able to form concrete, well thought out ideas that show you did your homework.
I can't, that's really great. I can't help myself. I need a follow-up, which is that if you had to pick a single text from, say, early American literature or what was your favorite book? What was your favorite text, that you engaged with, that you remember, and that maybe you wrote a paper about that informs a lot of those skills?
Yeah, so I think it was Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, where I talked about I think the paper was along like the argument of women in women in politics, or how they helped with the them as like a political component to wow, I'm blanking now, but yeah, it was definitely Uncle Tom's Cabin, using Margaret Fuller's work uh to supplement my argument of women in abolitionist politics.
That sounds terrific. I'm sorry, I ambushed you with that one. Just because I couldn't help myself. But you pointed to actually something really important, kind of indirectly there, which is just how much the English major, at least the way that we want to imagine it here at SJU, extends beyond the classroom. And so I'm wondering sort of what other experiences, either in terms of internships that you had that were maybe related to the education that you got at SJU, or an honors thesis, or a service learning course, or some kind of study abroad experience that you had while you were out here, or experiential learning like inside out. Did you take advantage of any kinds of opportunities like that helped you prepare in some way for the job market or this specific role that you have now?
Yeah, so I did write an honors thesis my like senior year. And I actually took a different approach where I decided that I wanted to write a novel because I was really into like creative writing. And so that alone like was like a big task of trying to do it. And I think what I learned from that, although I might not have learned it very well, since I do remember rushing to the deadline of the day before like my thesis presentation, was this idea of like kind of like project management of, how do you take this really big task and like break it down into like actionable like chunks so that you can execute against. And so one part of my job is that I do take these really big feature ideas and I work with engineers on how to break them down into actionable tasks so that they can go and code those experiences.
That is a fascinating application of the importance of like the whole writing process that we think about when we think about an honors thesis, developing those skills in such a really cool and interesting context. Thanks so much. That's really great. What advice, just broadly speaking, would you give to students as they think, about approaching the job market? And I mean that kind of, I guess, at any level, like how far back, early on in the education, but also like literally when you sit down and you're sort of like writing a resume, writing cover letters. Any advice at any point in that process that you haven't mentioned that you'd love to share?
Yeah, so I think like first step is like being open to any and all possibilities within the job market. Um, I like went into a like fresh off the stage of graduation thinking that I wanted to work in the nonprofit space. And I did do that, and it was really interesting. But once I kind of opened my idea, opened up my viewpoint to jobs that were a little bit more traditionally corporate, I found that there were positions that really interested me, that, were part of like quote unquote corporate America. Um, so being open to any and all possibilities. And then the second thing that I kind of would call out is that have this understanding that it's okay if your first job or even your first couple of jobs isn't your dream job. So my first job out of college, I worked as a program coordinator at a think tank that was focused on research and educational programming on strategic weapons proliferation issues. So this was by no means my dream job, but I was able to gain like valuable experience. And it helped me to find out like what I enjoyed doing and what kind of work I wanted in my like next position.
That's terrific. I mean, I don't know about the job itself, but the experience and what you took from the experience. Uh, just shift focus entirely. I'm wondering, how does your Jesuit education impact how you work and or the kinds of decisions that you've made to date?
Yeah. So I think at St. Joe's and, a Jesuit education in general, like there's this culture of curiosity and there's this idea that learning is a journey. So within my like job and within kind of the roles I take, is there's really like this need of like being a problem solver, but to be able to solve a problem, you kind of have to ask like why, or you have to be curious and figure out what the root cause is. And I think from like St. Joe's and from my Jesuit education was really able to like cultivate that, um, it's more about drilling down to to the problem itself and then being able to solve the problem based off of that, because sometimes the tech problems that I try to solve, people might say they want one thing, but it's really a completely different thing that they want. So having that openness and being curious to all of the possibilities of how you can solve a problem.
Terrific. And just a kind of like a last couple of very practical sorts of questions, and I apologize if you feel like some of these are a little bit redundant with some of the questions I asked before, but what types of internships do you think students should try to secure to prepare them for the job market?
Yeah. So I really think that like any internship experience you can get is going to be super helpful and great to have on your resume. And again, even if it's not your dream internship, I guarantee that there's something that you can learn from it, whether it's the skills on the job or you learning something about yourself in terms of what you want and what you don't want. That kind of being said, like I would also say that with internships, if there is a field that you're particularly passionate about or interested in, then definitely go looking in that kind of direction, of searching, within companies or for titles that sound of interest to you, to try to secure, because it's always great when you can apply for a job and you say, I did this thing in my internship and have some of that more concrete experience. But the other like flip side of the coin too is that with your internship, there also is a flexibility to kind of chart your own path too, of finding ways that you can learn things that like might not necessarily be within your job description. So for instance, for my first internship, I really learned that I wanted to code. So it was reaching out to other people within the team, even though coding wasn't in my job responsibilities, and like finding ways to like learn that to kind of expand that area of knowledge.
Terrific. And final kind of like preset question that I have here. Based on, you mentioned working on a resume, you mentioned writing cover letters and sort of like sending out your application broadly, but assuming that you make it past that phase, do you have any kinds of tips about interviewing? Or I mean, a while ago you mentioned sort of the importance of LinkedIn. Do you have any suggestions about professional networking and starting to develop, that ability to kind of see where the opportunities are and make pivots appropriately?
Yeah, definitely. So for interviewing, like my biggest interviewing tip would be to make sure you do your homework and prep for the interview. So my personal prep includes like a couple of different things. So first step is researching the company you're interviewing at. So learning about their mission, what it is they do, history, and if they've done anything newsworthy lately. And if they have a Glassdoor, then go on their Glassdoor and read what their current and former employees have to say. And then the next thing that I like to do is kind of put together a list of potential interview questions and outline your answers to them. Because I guarantee you will be nervous on the day of your interview. I personally outlined everything that I was going to say for this because I knew I was going to be nervous for this interview in itself. So some ways I like to put together a list. Some ways I like to put together a list of interview questions is I first like to look at Glassdoor and see if there are any interview questions that people have posted there and kind of use that as a guide of like what could potentially be asked. The next thing I like to do is I like to Google the position you're interviewing for and then include in the search query like interview questions. So for me, I've done product manager interview questions, and I guarantee you there will probably be a list of articles that will come out. And then kind of the third thing that I've heard people recently start doing is that they use ChatGPT. So one way that they're doing it is they basically copy and paste the job description into ChatGPT and then say like, provide a list of 15 to 20 interview questions based off this job description. And that can also be kind of used as a way to like, see what are some potential interview questions that you could be asked related to the job description. So then for networking, I think like LinkedIn is an awesome way to network. But if you want to connect with someone that you don't know, I would definitely recommend like sending a message. So I know for me personally, if someone sends me a connection and we've never like met or I don't have any mutual connections, and if there isn't a note, there's probably a low probability of me accepting the connection. And then like finally, like if you do schedule time to meet with someone for a networking call, then a couple kind of tips for me there are make sure you show up for the call/Zoom. We don't like to be ghosted if you've made time with us. Make sure you come prepared with questions to ask beyond like, what do you do or what's your career advice? Because folks are taking time to talk to you. I guarantee they're very excited to talk to you about it. But it's great to know that like you've thought about this as much, like just as much as we've put the time on our calendar. And then I think finally, like sending a quick thank you note, it really does like go a long way.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. I have to be honest with you. The moment that you mentioned using ChatGPT in interview preparation, I felt as though an abyss opened up beneath my feet, and I wanted to plummet down this rabbit hole, asking you and probing you all of these questions about the role of ChatGPT in sort of the way that we go about our lives today. However, as many questions as I might have for you, I am sure that our audience has far more and probably far more relevant questions to them. And so I'd love to transition now to the Q&A portion of the session. And so students, anyone who's listening along, if you have a question, you can either feel free to share it into the chat, or you can use the reactions function to raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and you can turn on your mic, and if you'd like your camera, introduce yourself and share your question. So I guess the floor is open. All right, I see a hand up from Jess.
Hi. So my question is like, would you say your liberal arts background significantly increase your ability to be more creative in your field and like make it easier to come up with new ideas?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think like from first hearing it, it would probably be like, yes, it has helped me with being like more creative. I think it's also helped with like a level of flexibility of being able to think kind of like outside of the box, and being more open to like the different like possibilities to like that enables some of that creative problem solving.
Thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions, observations, anything you'd like to share? Sorry, I should probably keep the chat open so that I can see it. That's right. We'll give everybody a minute in case anybody is typing something. I know that that's always something that I've struggled with in Zoom.
Professor Brown?
Yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah, yes, sorry.
I'm trying to figure out where the camera. Oh, there's the camera. Wait a minute. We have a couple in here, and I'm in the classroom with them.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I know that there are some classrooms that are zooming in, and so if there are questions from the audience in there, yeah, feel free.
I don't want to interrupt anybody else, though, either. I just want to be very clear. Were there other, I mean, we do have at least, I think we have 2 here right now. Is that okay? They asked.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Let's go for it.
Go for it, Jack.
I was gonna say, like,
Speak up, and why don't you stand, Jack, why don't you come up here and so you can see. Thank you, Catherine, by the way. We're very grateful to have you here.
I was gonna ask if she could like change her degree, like what would she change it to? Because I've never really I've never really met anyone with the degree she has. So I was curious, like if she like was there any other career she was interested in before she chose those as her majors? And like would she go back to that if she could? Sorry, this is a random question.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah. So I am going to say that like I loved everything about being an English major. I loved reading books. I loved getting to talk about books. I loved writing papers. I think one of the really unique things about an English major, and I will say this might be my time, I haven't looked at the degree requirements, is that there is like a pretty unique level of flexibility in terms of the different coursework you get to do. So I actually took a lot of classes in economics, psychology, and linguistics. And I think like that helped, like, you know, that being part of a liberal arts like education, like enabled me that like really unique opportunity. I think if I had to like go back and like redo anything, it might have been to take maybe like a class or two on computers, like within the computer science program. Because it wasn't until after I had graduated that I really I discovered that I really enjoy coding and getting to do like some of learning those like programming languages.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I think we had another question here, don't we? Do we?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see another hand in the chat yet, so yeah, go for it. If there's another question from the classroom there.
Is there another one here? No. I have a question. Catherine, can I ask you a question? I'm Father Brennan. I teach in the, I don't think I taught you. But I have a question. So
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in the Science Center with 14 captive freshmen who are taking crafted language. Did you take crafted language when you were here?
I did not take graphic design when I was.
You went straight into the text context. Here's my question for you.
I think it was craft of language.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I did take craft of language. Yes.
Yeah. So you know something about how that class.
Yes.
And Dr. Green has a question. We'll get back to that one. But here's my question. I think this might be of interest to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
This is a class too where I am the new teacher for the class right now. I can take it over. And one of the things I'm thinking about here, and I just like to think with you a little bit and with my class a little bit about this, if you could, is what would be a good writing assignment in craft of language? I have a couple ideas about this, but I'm very interested to hear from somebody who took the class and might have some experience going out into the, into the professional world. What would be a good writing assignment for a class of freshmen to do right now? And believe me, I'm taking a few notes on this now because I'll be interested to see what we come up with. If you have any input, if you can, and you can also say here, I don't have any input on that. That's your problem, Father Brennan. But if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think like one thing that's like becoming a really interesting, so within technology in general, and this kind of touches on Dr. Green's first like question, is there's a real need for people who know how to communicate. So technical writers is like becoming like a booming field. And one space that I find really interesting is like writing like how-to documentation. So like, how do you use X, Y, and Z? So it's also something that's like kind of challenging to do well, especially if you've ever like gone on and like tried to assemble IKEA furniture. Like, it's really hard to like write good how-to documentation. So I would say that this is something that could be really interesting to like do, is to write a how-to doc. and to be able to put that together, because you're able to show like the linear progression of actions. And it's also something that you could put in a portfolio too.
Thank you very, very much. I'm very interested in that idea, Katherine. That's helpful for us to hear. And this is perhaps especially true. This was aimed at, of course, promoting the English major, but also, of course, as you would know from Craft of Language, we have a lot of people in this body, almost everybody in here, who are not English majors, and we want to be as attentive to them as we can as well. Thank you very much. I think you had some questions Dr. Green wanted to ask. There some hands up, so we don't want to monopolize all this. Thank you.
That's right. So I see another question from Dr. Green in the chat, and then I want to call on Jean. So first, did your parents support your choice of major? We have in the chat.
I am very fortunate to say that yes, my parents did support my choice of my English major. I think, you know, for my parents, it was, I demonstrated that I found a way to make the English major like work out, but both of them also have like a value on like, know the value of like being able to write and communicate well. And with my mother having a more traditional like corporate job, you know, she understood like how that skill like was like is like a big like need and sometimes a gap within the workplace.
Terrific. Yeah, thanks. So I want to call on Jean, and then I see a question from Logan in the chat. So Jean, go for it if you want to turn on your mic.
Okay, hi. So my question is, what was your reality shock entering into the workforce after graduating from SJU? Like expectations of what life after graduation would be like versus what it actually was for you?
Yeah. So I think like one of the things that like I found most interesting about like graduating is just like feeling like your like sense of like feeling like connected to people, because at SJ, like at St. Joe's, you're on Hawk Hill and like all of your friends are like right there. Like it's so easy to be able to, you know, see them and interact with them, or to even like find new activities and everything. But as an adult, like it's a little bit more challenging to find that sense of community and that like connectedness. And you know, like find like purpose that might be like outside of, you know, your like outside of your career.
Thanks. That's really, and you went back. So you obviously were here, but you went back to, you said you grew up in the DC area, right?
I did,
Where you
yes.
are now. Okay. Okay. But even still, it's, you know, having those connections. Okay. So I'm just going to read Logan's question aloud from the chat. Do you have any tips that you can give us that helped you stay on top of your schoolwork? And did you use any of those tips to help you stay on top of your work at your job? So this is, I guess, about, you know, all of those, you know, executive functioning skills that we develop in college and how relevant they are, I guess.
Yeah. So I lived by my planner when I was at St. Joe's. I actually like had like carried around a calendar that was like the size of my torso that had all of my different like meetings, like club meetings and assignments due and everything like that. So I could get like kind of that big picture of, you know, what my club activity was and what paper did I have due. So I wasn't spending an all-nighter in the library. Plot twist, there were still nights where I was spending where I was doing all-nighters in the library. But I think like as a busy professional, like I still utilize a calendar and use a to-do list to be able to get that big picture, to be able to stay on top of things and to kind of be able to project manage my responsibilities against, you know, the different due dates and the other things that I have going on as well.
Great, thanks. There's another question from Fu in the chat, and I'm going to read this aloud as well. I was wondering if you practice any exercises to help smooth out the writing process. Sometimes the papers that I write become repetitive because I'm unable to be flexible and creative in my writing.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question, and that's also so I am a big believer in research, and I would typically like find all of the basically write out like bullet points of like what the argument I wanted to make was, and what is the secondary research that like would help me support my argument, and kind of like create like structures and outlines that way. And I think too is was having this understanding that like a first draft does not necessarily need to be the final paper, is just, it's better to get things out on paper and then to go and clean up, to see like the words, to see the words there.
Horrific. Okay, just more stuff from the chat. Yeah, I want to. I'll just keep on reading them aloud. This is Hannah. Asks, how did you find integrating into the professional workplace after college?
Oh man, you guys are asking really good questions. So I think for me, I went from working, like my first job was like a very small office with like 10 people. And then my job after that job was when I started working at Navy Federal Credit Union, which is a company that I want to say like employs like over like 2,000, maybe like 5,000 people. And my team, like the little team that I worked on alone, had 10 people. So I think like it was definitely a challenge to like figure out how to like build those professional like relationships. But I would also say that like integrating yourself into a professional workplace is kind of similar to making friends within class. It's finding like, it's like looking over, it's like, this may sound like a little like strange, but it is looking over at somebody and being like, oh, hey, like, what'd you think about that meeting? What'd you think about that reading? And then building up that small talk to come to that then becomes like a professional like relationship. And it definitely has its challenges like within a remote workplace too. It might take a little bit more time, but your coworkers are people who also want to like get to know you as a person too, and they're very open to forming like relationships and like collaborating and working together.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't mind, I would love to ask a follow-up question specifically about that remote experience, and
Yeah.
how much experience, have you, I guess, had kind of working remotely, collaborating, because so much of your job is collaborating in different kinds of ways and through different kinds of modalities, whether that's like a shared Google Doc or, daily or weekly Zoom sessions, or whether that's like sitting down in a conference room together, or, peeking over the cubicle wall at somebody. So can you sort of explain how you've kind of worked within those different modalities in terms of collaboration or any other aspect of, the professional workplace?
Yeah. So my like up until the pandemic, I'd always worked in an office. But then upon the pandemic, I've spent the last 3 years like working remotely, and my current team it spans around the globe. Like I have folks who work in Denmark. I work with people who are on the West Coast, people in Mexico. And like a major part of our job is to like collaborate and to communicate together. So, with my team every day, I meet with them for the first 30 minutes of our morning, and we talk about what we did yesterday and what we did, like what we plan on working on today. And that's like a method of teamwork called Agile, which is a completely different conversation. And if you're interested in that world, strongly recommend it, because that's, the big hype thing within the tech space. And so then the other thing too is like there's so many different collaborative technologies of like we meet over Zoom, and we'll have working sessions over Zoom. We'll all work together like in a Google like paper doc and like leave comments and see things like that. So it has its challenges like to work collaboratively, but we're like really lucky now, like with all of the different technology offerings that are around that enable this kind of constant communication.
That's really great. I mean, this is a kind of a rapidly transforming sort of work paradigm, and I don't know how much ArcXP specifically is a tool that people are using in this kind of, and so there's a kind of meta level to this kind of question, but that's really, really fascinating to hear you say. I just want to share, this is a comment, I don't see really a question, but I'm just going to share a comment that was written into the chat. Calendars, physical planners, anything to help visualize due dates and major project timelines are golden. Virtual planners can also help. Try out different modes to see what makes sense to your brain and what you enjoy, or will check regularly. This is a terrific piece of advice just in terms of those organizations organizational skills that you were talking about earlier. And so I just thought I'd share that one as well. Are there any other kind of questions or observations or similar types of comments? Feel free to join the conversation, anyone. We are kind of approaching, we're at the 45-minute mark, so we're approaching the sort of like the expected sort of end of our conversation, but obviously there's so much more to be said. Like I said, I have been making notes of all of the questions that I have, but I'd love to hear anything else from any of our students or any of the kind of the classrooms that might be zooming in right now, or anybody's typing into the chat. I'll give another couple minutes.
Yeah, and I would just like to say too, like, this is, just my experience, and like it's by no means like a template or should be used as a guide on like what to do. Like I had said before, like you all are like at a wonderful university and you have so many supportive people around you, that like, yes, like it's okay to feel anxious about like the future and about the job market, but you're learning really valuable skills within your liberal arts education or within your business degree that's going to empower you and make and help you get that like first job or that first internship.
Absolutely. And I'd love, I have a question from Philippe here. He asks, would you say that your pre-existing leadership roles made it easier to make connections once you enter the professional field?
Yeah. I would say like pre-existing leadership roles are also just being involved within the different like clubs or the different spaces too. Because, with some of these like different clubs or within these leadership roles, like you're having to meet and, quote unquote, network with people that you've never met before. So it definitely, it helps with maybe finding like common ground. And flexing that like talking to people muscle or the elevator pitch, but I think like just being somebody too of talking to your classmate or having conversations with your professors helps you like build up that small talk / networking backbone.
Terrific. Yeah, thanks. And we have kind of a follow-up or related question from Hannah here. What characteristics do you believe define an effective team or project leader?
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
I think, somebody who is probably organized, who is able to like, foster a sense of community and collaboration, who can be like flexible and like inviting, so that people feel comfortable to share their ideas, because your teams can have people who are shy and people who are a little bit more outspoken. But then I would say also like somebody who is decisive. So at the end of the day, you have like there's times where you're going to have to make tough calls, and it's being and some of the best leaders that I've seen are the ones who can make those calls, and then stand behind them, even if things do go awry.
That's right. Terrific. And another question just popped up from Anaya in the chat. Have you ever practiced or considered doing independent freelance coding projects? If so, what were your experiences with them? And maybe you can even broaden that beyond just coding, but any kind of like independent or freelance work.
Yeah, so I had I think I mentioned before, I did get my master's degree and I went to Georgetown University to get a master's in technology and technology, with a concentration in kind of business technology and product development, once I realized like this was a field that I wanted to go in. Funny thing is, that is not what I planned on going to graduate school with. I completely changed my mind like halfway through that, and was very fortunate that I had a graduate program that offered that flexibility. But some of that too was participating in some different fellowships I had there, where I helped with migrating one of their academic journals like website onto like a different platform. So I haven't done any like specific freelance projects, but as part of different experience, like different like fellowships or other jobs have like looked for opportunities to kind of take on some different independent projects and to learn more about like how to code.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. Any other, we're just about at 50 minutes, but if there are any other questions from anybody, if you can raise your hand or type them into the chat. Okay, I'll just give one more minute before I wrap things up. You know, it's been so lovely talking with you, Katherine, today. And one of the things that I love that you've kind of emphasized really at every level is the importance of that like flexibility, both kind of professionally and then like also the ways in which the, you know, your work at SGU kind of at every level developed those kind of those habits around flexibility, around kind of communication with different people, different audiences at different levels through different modalities. Because as you said at the start of this conversation, you don't always know what the future is going to hold for you. And so the ways in which you prepared and that you were prepared kind of gave you a set of skills, and that you were very conscious about developing a set of skills to be adaptable to a remarkable variety of different kinds of situations. And so while as much as I personally would love to sit here and talk further with you about Harriet Beecher Stowe and Margaret Fuller, you know, too often I worry that people might get lost in like the details and the specificity of the kinds of work that we cover in English literature courses, and then the wide applicability of those skills that you develop, specifically because you cared so much about Harriet Beecher Stowe and Margaret Fuller. And so it was such a great opportunity to see a demonstration of how that actually turned into this kind of wonderful, robust career path. So thank you again. And I hope everybody else, I can see so many different thanks popped into the chat. Oh, I do have just one final question, it looks like, from Hannah. Which is, did you have what did you hope to accomplish in your first 6 months on the job? How did you kind of like establish any of those goals? And then maybe that one will tie us off and everybody can give more thanks.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't see that one, Hannah.
I think you know, with any job, like it's really important to have those 30, 60, 90, or even 6 months like goals. And I know for me, it was learn how to like, it was be open to learning everything that I could about the job, and everything about the company and the team that I was working on, so that I could be a valuable contributor, and being able to contribute in a positive way.
Great, thank you. And yes, this was so informative and useful for many majors, you know, those of us who are in this call, including not just English majors, but those beyond. And so I hope everybody will join me in thanking Katherine for joining us today and providing such a great insight into her career. Katherine, we're grateful for your time, and we hope to see you back on Hawk Hill soon.